Welcome, everybody. This is Hugh Massie, the chairman and founder of DNA Behaviour International. And today I'm delighted to be hosting another one of our identity conversations. And I've got the great fortune to have with me Keena Pettijohn from Florida. And Keena has another person who survived the recent hurricane. So I'm glad you're smiling, Keena, and everything's working pretty well around you. So, you know, that's wonderful. And Keena is the founder of Lifelogixs, which is a strategic consulting firm that helps banks, credit unions build the right tech stack to have greater impact with the customer. So she's very much at the start of instigating change for these organizations, and she's got a long pedigree in financial services. So I think there's no one better who understands the industry than Keena. So Keena, welcome.
Thank you. It's an honor and a pleasure. Truly it is. I've been waiting for this moment.
Well, so have I. And I know in our pre-discussion a little bit, I learned so many things, and, you know, just even how we communicate with customers, clients, bringing feeling into the money conversation, getting advisors to adapt, what financial wellness really is. But before we unpack some of that, why don't you just tell us a little bit about your life and career background and how you got to this place of being the founder and instigator, in a way, if you want to call it that, of Lifelogixs.
I was very impressed with the financial events of the world. I was very fortunate that at age 7, my father read to me the Herald Tribune. We watched daily Walter Cronkite. We discussed what was happening on Wall Street. So I knew very early on that what was happening in the world was a financial definition. So when I graduated college without a job, it was my goal to get involved in Wall Street. And my first job, which was very difficult to come by, I was earning $12,500 a year. But I was impressed with something that was really embedded in me from family, that money is success. Money defines you. Your position in life is defined by your financial stature. So how they handled money was really, that's how you would be judged. That's what you need to accumulate. And you defined yourself success with your W-2 and all of the other financial attachments that went in. So 30 years went by. I was very fortunate to enter Wall Street when there were not a lot of females in the business.
Yeah. And
the challenges were not just corporate, but also in terms of the gap in earnings. I had always said, why do I have to work twice as hard to make half as much? So from a self perspective, I always tried harder. I always knew that if I made more money in some way, I would be happy. I always wanted a voice in the meeting and a chair at the table. So for 30 years, as I accumulated more wealth, more executive titles, more opportunity, that was very, very important to me in terms of who Keena was. So 30 years later, after being a willing corporate victim, I had decided that I wanted to define my contributions to the industry based upon tenets of health, wealth, and happiness. It wasn't just one dimension. So I arrived here many years later, started Lifelogixs at age 65, wanting to take a much more holistic view of what motivated people. And now 5 years later, celebrating 5 years of Lifelogixs and my 70th birthday. So that's how I got here, you.
Well done, Keena. And, you know, I think it's a great tribute to you to reinvent yourself in your life at age 65. And in a way, a lot of people talk about retiring. In a way, what you've gone and done is what one of my friends called is refiring, refiring up your life and putting meaning to it in a whole new way. And there's no reason why, you won't be very successful. I know you will be. My stepfather did the same thing. And, he had a corporate life and then went and started his own business around the same age that you did. And it works. And I think it's lots more people need to hear that story. Because we're also going to all live longer. And, you can't just retire and do nothing at 65, because 65 is young. When you think about the world we live in today and the world we're going to live in tomorrow. So I think it's fantastic. But I just want to go back to something, Keena, that you were saying there in terms of, early in life, you were somewhat trained or conditioned by your family. And I think Wall Street does it, that success is about how much money you have. That's the yardstick as to whether you're any good. And secondarily, if you're a woman earning less money and it's harder to make the same as a man, in a way you're seen as less successful, or could be perceived as less successful, which is, you and I would agree, completely flawed and wrong. But so what was the trigger for you in terms of that change of thinking? Did something happen, or you just decided that this is wrong and I'm not going to live under that black cloud anymore? Was there something that happened that got you to change that?
There was. When you are under the assumption that you'll be happy with wealth, and my W-2 kept on going up and up and up and up. And then I thought that I had reached a plateau. And I remember my accountant saying, gee, that's a lot of money to make, Keena. I should have married you. And I wasn't happy. So my accountant was happy with me. But when you put these goals out there to measure your success by a single aspect, which is money, and then you find that emotionally you're not satisfied, intellectually you're not satisfied, socially you're not satisfied, you name it, something is going awry. And that was working through me all of the time. So when I had decided, what would make me happy, I started to go through a very painful reassessment process and said, it's not just how much do you have. And my relationships deteriorated. I'll be honest about that.
Yeah.
My ability to work 80 hours a week didn't seem to make any significant change.
Yeah.
I had 9 opportunities to rebuild bank programs and wealth and insurance and credit unions and RIAs. And each one, when I finished it, I still wasn't satisfied. And I shared with someone that when the process is over, so am I. And that was very disturbing to me, that unless I was living my best life by building something, I was not satisfied. So that was the turning point when I had said, there's got to be more. There's got to be more aspects to our full life. And again, Lifelogixs was a decision that after being a willing corporate victim, I wanted to see someone else's name on the door. It was so important to empower myself, to really define, when they used to use words, your authentic self. I had no idea what that meant. I probably was the best imposter out there, but someone had said to me, and I was interviewed by a gentleman in Ireland. He said, so who are you? What do you do? What's the benefit of working with you? And I couldn't answer the questions. And that was the epiphany that I had, to go back into myself and saying, why are you here? What are you offering? How do you create relationships all over again? So that was the turning point for me. late in life.
Yeah, it hit you late in life. I think I was lucky that that came to me a little earlier, but I know that when I was 35 years old, no, not even 35, 34, 33 years old, a friend of mine asked me the question one day, what are you really passionate about? And I'd never answered a question like that before. And immediately came out of my mouth, well, I want to help people all over the world become more financially self-empowered. And that took me on a whole journey. And at that time, this was when I was still living in Sydney, I had got out of being a corporate victim, in a sense, at working in a large accounting firm. And I'd set up the wealth management business, and it was actually quite successful at the start. You know, I had clients from $1 billion down to, $1 million. It all worked. I was doing deals, sort of in a way, it was like heaven on earth for many people. And I'm there and really in my early 30s doing this. But internally, I was miserable, just like you were. And that question was the wake-up call for me. And I went on the journey. And actually, that's what led to the birth of the DNA behavior business a few years later.
Aren't you a reformed accountant? And I'm a born-again millennial. If we want to do this,
that's where the reformed accountant comes from. And as I've learned, there's many dimensions to the reformed accountant. But I'm glad I had all that training, that business training and expertise. But without using the pun of my name, the behavioral space has given me a way to humanize myself, and bring behavior to people's lives. And we're still at the early stage of the journey of all this. I'm sorry to say, I mean, it's been around, knowledge of this has been around since Aristotle and Pythagoras, but
right.
Operationalizing it in people's lives is still, we're getting closer. And I think that's where I'm thankful to be connecting with you, Keena, because that's what you're really wanting to do through the tech stacks.
Absolutely.
How do we bring it to people's lives?
Well, what you're doing is fantastic. And, I always go back to Drucker's statement, if you can't measure it, you can't measure it, can't improve it. And when you start to look at creating an impact, meeting people where their money are, there are values across the board, behaviors across the board that you have to measure, because people do understand a number. They understand an accumulation of numbers, and we do this every day. So if I was looking at my FICO score, I know that's a number. If I'm looking at just my body temperature going to a doctor, I know it's a number. Health, wealth, and happiness was not measured, in my understanding, 5-6 years ago. And I said, I think financial advisors should be more life coaches. And I started to talk about the metamorphosis of financial coaches morphing into insurance and banking, much different than just a financial plan. And having done multitude of integrations and also being on the committees for requests for proposals, I said, there's got to be a much different perspective than a single source account. That's where Lifelogixs was born, to be able to look at a much more larger scale. And to this day, I'm still confused about the definition of financial wellness. I'm still confused in terms of how we all going to agree on a universal measurement. And that's where I think DNA behavior, what you do, is so critical, because it at least allows a benchmark, a place to draw the line in the sand, to allow someone insight as to where their decisions are made, whether they're by what they learned, what they heard, what someone said, but no matter what, it's in there, as you say, the DNA.
Do you think the whole area of the health and wellness part is too invisible in some ways for these firms to get their head around and for management to want to deal with? I mean, I think that's an issue that I've seen with human behavior, that we all know it's there. We all know these issues are there, and leaders do. But because it's not measured on the page, it's not in a bank statement, it's not in an account statement,
Correct.
transactional report, there's a tendency just to ignore it and say, okay, we'll deal with that later, or it's too soft. But this is actually the hard data, and it can be captured. That's the thing. That's why I think what you're doing is great. And so it comes as, with you as the influencer style person, the promoter, how do we really promote this extended side of wellness to
I
become
love that
more
question.
mainstream?
When I did the conversation or the panel this year about the future of wealth management, wellness as a service versus SaaS,
Yeah.
I was there with other panelists, and it was interesting because when employers offer employee benefits, they seem to understand how to position it as when they need coaching, what their basic educational level is about investment concerns, their basic understanding of how to budget, how to plan. And what I found that is what they had was amiss totally in the world of wealth management, because they're looking at assets from which to manage. From a benefit to an employee, we're looking at how can we coach you better? What is it that can allow you to be more comfortable, or as you would put it, financially stress-free?
Yep.
So again, for me, starting with the basics, a company said to me, we're going to meet them where their money is. Well, that's great. That wasn't something I really understood. And I think DNA behavior actually meets them where their money is. It allows a measurement to say, okay, so this is how you came here. This is where your decision-making faculty is, but that is not a language, which is what I did at the Bank Insurance Securities Association, not a language that's akin to wealth management. We start with risk. We start with a portfolio. We talk words like beta, all of the above, but that doesn't foot into the total person, period.
And that's the problem, is in financial services, we are starting at the wrong place. We are starting with the risk, and we're starting with a portfolio. We're starting with the linear stuff, and we've got to get in a way to the under the hood a lot more to the human side if we're going to unlock people and cause change. And even if we just keep it basic at financial, most planners start at the risk level, but what about at the savings level? I think that's where the greatest problem is, and the greatest level of stress, and more good could be done for people, because without savings, you've got nothing to invest, and really the risk profile is irrelevant. Or the person's got to take so much risk with a limited amount of money, it's in a nonsensical situation as well. And this is the problem, the debt trap, whatever you want to call it, that we're in, and with the financial circumstances that we're facing right now. I mean, I don't think anyone can hide from that. This is going to come out big time. Well,
the interesting thing is I can give you all kinds of facts about, how credit debt is increasing. I can tell you how people are, living paycheck to paycheck, don't have the ability, for an unplanned emergency. And it's very, very basic. And I think this is where the world is missing. To plan for a goal, something as simple as automatically sweeping it out of their basic working account out of sight, out of mind. It has to be habitual. So this is where technology can literally assist. And it's not a leap of faith. It's very, very hard to save. Understanding how to budget is another challenge. There's many people out there that are just doing basic budgeting, understanding how to basic budget, how to plan meals for a month. But if I can't give you a vehicle that automatically takes one account and moves it to another, and having those goal savings accounts done automatically for you, and there's many tech companies that are apps right now that are being endorsed by many consumers that say, you know what, I don't need that $10. And the best part about technology is if I start to watch your spend patterns, which I can help you make a change for the better. Yeah.
And that's really where we've got to start, I think, isn't it? Is in the savings, but also we've got to connect to people, which I think is coming back to communication, is connect to them on their terms as to why they need to do it. Because if you just say to some people, well, you need to save more, they're never going to hear that.
And if I just go in there not knowing their journey, and this is where I think DNA is really important. Yeah. There's a lot to be learned about the customers, the clients, the members' journey. If you allow them to determine what's important to them, and it's very interesting because this is how technology is mapping to the customer experience. And if they start to land on, I'm curious about auto loans, or I'm curious about mortgages, or I'm curious about credit cards, there's something that's happening in their life that is moving along that journey. And I think if we watch that a little bit more carefully, they're giving us information about where we need to meet them. And technology is not assuming that they don't have to nurture and nudge them along the way. And I think that's powerful in terms of being a partner.
Technology is absolutely vital to this, because it can't just happen all in conversation, although conversations are important. In a way, the technology needs to be used as a tool to power up better conversations, to get people to be nudged, I think. Because technology itself hasn't got a personality, so that can't, in a way, doesn't connect to people. But it's a very valuable tool to help advisors, consultants, coaches, really the whole life support team, if you want to call it that, to support the individual.
You're giving them insights along the way. When you give actionable insights along the way, it immediately conjoins you to the opportunity of conversation. So what I find in terms of working with enterprise, whether it's a credit union or whatever, they have, and I love this, measurable data that matters. You see, we have it. There is information about their how they're opening accounts, whether they're online or they're in person, their bill payment, who's they're paying. We could look at their percentage of income versus what's outgoing or incoming. We can see exactly how much they're contributing to the retirement accounts if they're involved in a health savings account or 401k. So I think that giving feedback in terms of data, meaningful measures that matter, allow the behavior that you're measuring to become much more significant.
Yeah, I think the measurement's very important, and putting measurement on the what's traditionally been the invisible is vital. Otherwise, people won't make changes. They don't know where they are at to start. So I think that is extremely important. So Keena, what I'd like to ask is, in terms of your identity out there in the marketplace, you've set up Lifelogixs. You're a very strong influencer, promoter. of ideas, technologies, concepts, getting people together. But what do you see as your identity? How do you want people to remember the work you're doing? Because I think, and again, you know, just to emphasize in here, you've gone through, like I have, really a great reformation in your own life to bring, which I think is going to bring about great change for many others beneficially.
Well, I just added a tagline, and it's probably, you know, a feel good. And I always say, we all do well when we all do good. And that's a mindset that I have. And years ago, I wanted to surround myself with people I aspired to be. That's not true anymore. I surround myself with people I want to serve. As a result of that, my mindset is looking at what purpose, how can we serve the community? How can we serve individuals that are overlooked? How can we assist families, or those families that are now in caregiving situations? How do they make certain that their affairs are in order? So I'm drawn to technology that does not look at it as, okay, here's a product solution. This is how you keep your life in order. I'm looking at triggers such as caring for those you love. How does technology fit into that? Planning a better future for your children. How does technology fit into it? How to be more resilient as a young divorcee widow. So again, I'm going back to serious moments in life, all life event triggered, that are meaningful to the individual. So that's what I focus on.
So would you see yourself, if I sort of put words on it, Keena, a humanizer of technology that then enables, you know, change to be instigated in people's lives? Does that, because that sort of seems like that's what you're seeking to do, I think, is to get, because technology just can't stand alone, as we've talked about, but how can it be humanized to address all of these life needs?
I like that.
Yeah.
I was just on a call, and people enjoy, even in their investing world, to not leave a carbon footprint, to be purposeful. So I don't know if I am humanized as much more socially organized to create good. Patagonia is a really good example where he gave his company away, millions, to be in a purposeful trust. I think that's the most important. Where can I best serve individuals? Where can I create opportunity for those that are going into the community? How can a wealth advisor at the same time elevate the needs of the world, the needs of women, those that, you know, are a little bit more not served? So I like what you said. I think I'm going to add that to my next line.
Well, I think it helps bring it together, because the humanizing the technology then enables you to touch people's, on a scalable basis, touch people's purpose, how they want to be communicated with, what are those what are those deeper set of needs they're going to have, whether it's dealing with a disadvantaged child, or, as you say, they're widowed or divorced, you know, the bigger needs that right now tech doesn't really help with any of that. And it needs to go further to do that. And the winning company in the future is going to have to do that, whether they're in financial services or they're outside it.
And the interesting thing in the world that I am and will be for the next year, it's all mission driven. So when you think about me working with technology firms that want to be involved in credit unions, think about it, non-for-profit. One of the most important missions, whether it's their board or their front line, is to be involved in the community. They claim that they are much better in financial wellness because they're really devoting their energies to the wellness of the member. They're not looking at them in terms of their total wallet. And that's a study, but most importantly, I'm a mission-driven company. And I think that defines who Lifelogix is across the board.
Yeah, no, that's very good. So, you know, because I think it's important to have mission. This can't just be soft. It's still got to connect to getting a result. But as we wrap up here, Keena, is there any tip or suggestion, recommendation that you'd like to make to listeners just to think about?
Well, I think it's important that you have tools from which to understand the member or the client. I think, you know, it's not what you said, it's not what you did, it's how you made them feel. And if you can show me that you know me through programs such as yourself, I think that creates a lifetime bond. So that's my leave behind.
Yeah, it's how you create that lifetime bond. I think it's very important, and people always remember how you made them feel, and often that comes from asking a great question that connects to a person's passion. So, Keena, thank you so much for spending time with me today. This has been great, and you know, I think we've really unpacked something here in terms of not just in you and your mission to humanize technology, but also that we need to get a lot deeper on what wellness is and bring that to the industry. Because I think ultimately, if we can do that, that's when we're also going to get people talking about money and addressing it properly.
Thank you, Hugh, for having me today. It's an honor and a pleasure.
That's fantastic, Keena. I'll look forward to talking to you soon, and I'll see you in Atlanta.
Yes, you will.